Welcome to our tape number 10 in a series of historical happenings in Grand Prairie, Texas. And we're going to be bringing back some of the memories of the city and its environs. And we are just so pleased today on February the 24th, 1986, to bring to you two very special people for the history of Grand Prairie. Mr. and Mrs. Marvin Bodine, living right near I-20 and Matthew Road area, and we are so pleased, Marvin and Miss Pearl, to welcome you all to the show. I know y'all are excited about being here. Is this your first taping of a show? Wonderful, good. So we're going to break you in right by talking about the history of Grand Prairie, Texas. Now, Marvin, a couple of weeks ago, we had your brother Earl on the show and featured he and Maxine. They brought us a little bit about the history of your family, but we always like to have you to come back and maybe fill us in on some of the things that possibly he left out. Would you like to tell the audience, our viewing audience, when you came to Grand Prairie, the name of your parents, and a little bit about your beginnings as a child in Grand Prairie, Texas? Your own, Marvin.
My mother and daddy moved out at Florence Hill in 93.
Okay.
No, I'm wrong on that. It was 95.
In 1895, right? All right.
And there was 3 of us children born at Florence Hill.
Uh-huh.
And the one was born in Garland.
All right.
And she died when she was a child.
All right. Now give me the name of your parents.
I Bodine.
Isaac?
Bodine.
Isaac Bodine, and your mother's name?
Kitty.
Kitty Bodine. And before Kitty married Mr. Bodine, what was her maiden name?
Range. Kitty Range.
Kitty Range Bodine. Oh, that's wonderful. All right, now, Marvin, as you grew up in the Florence Hill area, your dad did what for a living?
He farmed.
He was a farmer.
Uh-huh.
Can you remember how many acres he farmed out in that area?
There was 318 acres.
318 acres. Did you have any cows and chickens and the other
Yes.
things that go along with the farm?
Yes.
Well, as you were raised up on this farm, did you have certain chores that you needed to do every day?
Every day.
What was your job then on the farm?
Well, I milked night and morning. Well, Earl and me were together.
All right.
And my daddy fed the stock, and that was every day.
That was every day.
That was his chores, to feed the stock.
Well, tell me, what kind of cattle and approximately how many did you have to take care of at that time?
We didn't have too many cattle, but we kept enough that we had milk, our own use.
All right. Now, how many cows did you milk every morning and every evening?
2.
2. That was your job.
Yeah.
All right. Were you into the separating of the cream from the milk and all of that?
No, we didn't do that.
You didn't do all of those good things. All right, when you had finished your chores and had milked the 2 cows in the morning, then was it time to go to school?
Uh-huh.
All right, now tell us about where you went to school.
Well, it was, my first schooling was, the school was on part of my daddy's farm at that time, but it was on Beltline Road.
All right, and what was the name of that school?
Florence Hill.
It was the old original Florence Hill School on Beltline, not where the one is located now.
No.
All right.
That one was built in 1915, the first building,
All right.
and it burned in 36.
And he's
And
talking about the second.
I'm talking about the second building.
Second.
And it burned, and they replaced it in 37.
All right, now tell me this, can you remember any of your teachers at that very first original schoolhouse of Florence Hill? You remember any of your teachers?
Myers.
Miss-
I've forgotten her first name. but
Mrs. Myers.
Myers.
All right, and she impressed you, right?
Yes.
All right, now how many grades did they have in this little school?
They went to the 10th.
Went to the 10th grade.
Now, Martin, you're talking about Florence Hill, not
No,
the
I'm
old
talking
one.
about the new, the school now.
That Myers,
Yeah.
it was Edna Myers.
Uh-huh.
All right. Then, after you went to school at Florence Hill, at the original one, and then finally when they built the new one, you went on to the other one and finished maybe the 10th grade there. Then where did you go to
I
school?
went to school in Arlington, NTAC.
You went to school in Arlington at NTAC. Well, tell me what you studied at that wonderful junior college at that time.
Mechanical arts.
Mechanical arts. And what did you have in mind of maybe one day doing with all that mechanical arts?
Well, at the time I was going to school, I'd like to have made a machinist.
You almost made a machinist. And then what happened to your career in college?
Went back to the farm.
You went back to the farm, and that way you became a machinist, but in a different way. You got to operate. Or were you still using the plow and the
No,
and
it's
the horse
tractors.
then? But
It went to tractors.
All right, you were into tractors then. And did you know how to work on that tractor?
Yes.
Hmm.
I did that, well, in the fall, and it wasn't busy. I tear it down and rebuild it.
All right, now, after NTAC and after going back to the farm, how long did you stay on the farm before you had another adventure?
Well, I retired from the farm.
You retired from that farm. All right, now, tell us about the history of your family. Do you have any children?
No.
You have no children, but I remember a young lady that you were married to for 42 years. Would you like to tell us her name so that we can get that into our historical record?
Hattie
And what was Hattie's maiden name?
Warren.
W-A-R-R-E-N, Hattie Warren Bodine. And she was a very fine young lady, and you all were always so wonderful to those of us that would come out to your farm, and you would share tomato plants and all of these, and onions and things with us so that we could take them and grow them, and we remember her very fondly. All right, and when you lost Hattie, then you continued on with your farming?
No. 2 years after Hattie died, I farmed, but I retired and sold out.
You retired and sold out. And at this time, what is located in the area of your farm where you had farmed?
That's part of Grand Prairie now.
That's part of Grand Prairie, and there's a housing development
Yes,
all around that, isn't there?
The home place and the place I own too.
All right. And subsequently, in a few years after that and after you retired, you met a wonderful childhood sweetheart. Then we're going to ask her all about her life before she married you in your later years. So if you'll just hold everything in abeyance here for a minute, we're going to get to Pearl Allspaw Bodine. Pearl, we want you to look out into your camera out here and just tell us anything that you would like to about your early beginnings in Grand Prairie, Texas, and your parents' name and your maiden name and etc. Would you do that for us?
Well, my parents' name, my father's name was T.H. Allspaw, and my mother's name was Gertrude Sanders.
And when did they come to Grand Prairie, Texas?
Well, my mother was a native of Duncanville, and her mother was a native of Duncanville. So as far as I know, 3 generations back, all Duncanville.
All right.
And I think Missouri was where the original clan came from to Duncanville.
All right, now tell me about your father.
My father came from Alabama when he was about 8 or 9 years old with his family and settled on Arkansas Lane.
All right, now tell me his parents' name so we can put that into our history. Do you remember his parents' name?
James Allspaw. James Allspaw was his name. And he married a Bostic. And her name was Emmeline.
Emmeline Bostic and then Allspaw.
And they were married in Alabama, and my father and his older brother were born in Alabama, but they were the two that were living then when they moved to Arkansas Lane. And very shortly they moved down to the farm where I was born, south of Grand Prairie, about, 6 or 8 miles, Marvin? And that Allspaw farm, that's where we lived.
All right, now Pearl, I'd like for you to tell me how many children were in the family and were your brothers and sisters, if you had any.
My oldest brother was Avery Allspaw, and then I, Pearl Allspaw, and Haskell Allspaw, Sanders Allspaw, and Essie Lou Allspaw.
All right, now of all of these, are there any that are still living in Grand Prairie, Texas?
No, I'm the only one.
You're the only one that is left in Grand Prairie, Texas.
My brother Haskell lives in Kermit, Texas.
Kermit, Texas. That's wonderful. Well, now tell me about your life at the farm with your parents. Did you have any chores to do, such as Marvin had?
I was a housekeeper.
You were the housekeeper.
Yes.
Wonderful. And this is what you did all the time you were growing
Well,
up?
I did a few outside chores, but mainly I had to housekeep.
Well, you had enough brothers to do all of those wonderful outside chores, right?
Yes, my baby sister, she was the last one, and she didn't come along very early, so actually I was the only girl to do a lot of things.
Yes, you certainly were. Well, tell me about your early life on the farm and how you got to school and where you went to school and some of those things for us, would you?
Well, I walked north to Bethel. Really, I think they called the school Hogwaller.
Yes.
You've heard of that.
Yes.
I went to school there a couple of years, and then they built the consolidated school district, and we moved to the building at Florence Hill.
Now, Old Bethel School, that was probably on the corner of Mayfield and Beltline.
Yeah.
How many grades were there in that school when you attended it? Do you
I think
remember?
there was 5.
You think there were 5 grades? And did you attend the 1st through the 5th grade there?
Oh, no, I just attended,
First grade.
no, I think we did 2 years.
2 years there, and then on to the Florence Hill
And
area.
then they consolidated and built the other school.
Now, going to Florence, do you remember from the Bethel School any of your teachers?
Edna, no. Clara Foley was one. And
That's fine. Let's go on to Florence
all.
Hill School. Then when the schools consolidated, and you were going on to Florence Hill, tell us some of your experiences there at the school. Did you walk to school each day?
yes, we walked because we lived just about 3/4 of a mile from the school. We walked down across the pasture, across a little creek, and up to the school building because we were right west of the school.
Right west of the school. All right. Can you remember some of the teachers or the principal of the Florence Hill School there?
Cowan, W.C. Cowan was one, and then Edna Myers was another one, and Lita Clark was another one.
McLaughlin.
Well, now he didn't teach there, did he?
Yes, that was his first,
Well, yes,
first
the
year
first
there.
principal.
The first principal
He came from Bethel over there.
from Bethel over to Florence Hill, and he was McLaughlin.
I'm not right sure how you spell it, but Claflin, I think.
McLaughlin. Well, that's wonderful. We haven't had that on any of our tapes, so we thank you for adding that to it. And all of this time that you were at Florence Hill, were you and Marvin in the same class?
No.
No. Was he ahead of you in school?
Marvin, I think you were a grade behind me, weren't you?
That's fine.
Grade behind you. All right. And then did you finish at Florence Hill?
Yes.
You finished at Florence Hill.
And then I came to Grand Prairie High School, and then I went to NTAC for a couple of years.
All right. Now, tell us about your career at Grand Prairie High School. That 1 year you were in Grand Prairie, do you remember any of your teachers or the principal? And how did you get to school all the way from Florence Hill?
Mr. Hudspeth was the superintendent at Grand Prairie at that time.
All right.
And Milton Mauser, who lived south of me, Homer Mauser's brother,
All right.
and I came in a buggy.
In a buggy.
Yes.
And you would do this every day, come in a buggy. What happened to the horse and buggy while you were in school during the
we
day?
left old Susie in the buggy on the south side of town, and I don't know whether we had any kind of a protection for her or not. Did we, Marvin?
No, there wasn't no protection.
I think he just took the bridle out of her and put a rope around her neck and tied her up down there.
Well, wonderful. And she would stay there while you all were in
Yes,
school.
I know that was an ordeal for Susie.
Well, that was, and Susie was the horse's name.
Yeah.
How very exciting. And did you have to, who would get the horse and catch it and harness it up every day?
Milton lived south of me, and he, of course,
He's the one
came.
that owned the horse, Milton.
He owned the horse and buggy, and he just came by and picked me up every morning.
Well, that was wonderful. All right, now tell me about riding all the way from Florence Hill to Grand Prairie High School in a buggy. Did you take your lunch in a brown bag or what?
Yes, we took our lunch, but I studied a lot of the time and tried to get him to, but he wasn't very much of a student. He didn't get along so well in school, and sometimes I'd really get behind him, and He'd study some.
Study some. Okay, now that you've finished Grand Prairie High School and we've gotten that little information, tell me about NTAC. What did you decide to study when you went to North Texas?
Well, I think I just took a general course there because I wasn't right sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to decide after I went to NTAC what to do, and I did go to where my uncle lived in Oklahoma, to Oklahoma A&M.
To Oklahoma A&M, how marvelous.
That's, I believe they call it Oklahoma State University now.
Mm-hmm.
It's, but anyway, I graduated there and I became a teacher.
And you became a teacher. Now tell us about your career as a teacher. Would you do that?
Well, let's see, I taught 42 years.
And where did you teach for 42 years?
Well, a lot of places.
A lot of places.
I taught here.
Where did you teach here in Grand Prairie, Texas?
I didn't teach in Grand Prairie. I taught at Cedar Hill and I taught at Lancaster.
All right.
Before that, I taught in Oklahoma, and I guess that's, let's see.
And what was your grade
Wilmer
level?
Hutchins. Did I mention Wilmer Hutchins?
No, Wilmer Hutchins, that's
Yeah, I
good.
taught-
And she also taught at Iran.
At Iran.
I
Wonderful.
ended up teaching in the oil country at Iran.
Oh, that is
And I
splendid.
married there, and my husband's name was Sid Underwood, and I have a little boy named Sid Underwood.
Sid Underwood. Where does Sid live?
Sid lives at Glenrose, and he works with the nuclear plant there
I see,
as
yes.
a public relations man.
That is wonderful.
And he's married, and I have 2 grandchildren.
All right, now we're going to have to name drop the grandchildren. We must get the Underwood grandchildren in on this, so
well-
let us have their names.
He was married to Ann Harvick, and he and Ann had my dear little Sonny Underwood.
All right.
And then he, after they divorced, he married Teresa. Oh, Marvin, tell me her name.
I don't know.
It's all right.
His wife's name's Teresa, and she has a little boy that's a year old that Marvin and I think's the most wonderful thing in the world.
That's wonderful.
Well, she had a little boy, so we have a little step-grandson.
So you have 3 wonderful Underwood grandchildren.
Yeah, that's right.
That is just super. Now, tell us about in teaching. You didn't tell us your field of teaching.
My field was history and economics,
Oh, wonderful. And
but I taught. As we used to have to do, whatever was a surplus and you had to have another teacher for. So I taught English and I taught science, and I didn't get to teach history all the time.
all right, now, we're going to get real personal with you, Pearl. Do you mind telling your age, the year that you were born, and
I
where?
was born 1905
1905, where?
in December at where I lived all my life on the farm out south of town.
Oh, I think that's so exciting, but now one more thing. What took you to Iran?
Well, I got tired of teaching down here. Well, I tell you what, at that time you had to teach anything extra that you didn't get to teach in your field down here. They just grabbed you up and made you do a lot of things. And I thought I needed a little excitement, so I simply applied out there for a school and got one.
That is wonderful.
So I taught out there for about 4 years.
All right, now that you've been teaching and finally have retired and moved back to this area, tell me how you ran into Marvin again.
Well, Marvin and I have known each other all our lives.
All right, I knew that you had
And
known.
he lived by himself and I lived by myself, and so
So you all just decided to make this a couple thing, and that is just wonderful. When did you 2 marry?
In 76.
76, the
Yeah.
good bicentennial year. Well, that is wonderful. And it's wonderful that you would keep in touch with a childhood sweetheart, and then finally, ultimately...
well, of course, we were always in touch to a certain extent.
Yes.
Because he and Hattie were, as long as I lived in this area, well, they were good friends of mine, too.
That is wonderful. All right, now, Pearl, we're going to let you rest just a minute, and we're going back to Marvin. Now, Marvin, out in the Florence Hill area, what do you think is one of the most important changes that you have seen come about out in that area?
Well,
People.
well, that's right, there is. So
What
a lot
what
of-
impact do you think this
Thousands
new
of
lake
people.
has had on that area?
Well, it's going to have a big, a big change. When it becomes water in it, it's going to make a big change.
All right, now, in Grand Prairie, the city of Grand Prairie, back in the good old days, back in about the 1930s and 40s, was very small, about 1,000 to 1,200 people. What do you think has been the greatest impact on the downtown part of Grand Prairie?
Well, it's when the plant started here. It was
All
a
right.
big, for the, there was about 1,500 voting precinct here, about 1,500.
All right.
Well, the very next year it jumped quite a bit that's from 1940.
All right.
And from then on, it's gained every year.
All right. Did you know anyone that worked at the plant?
Well, quite a
Many
few.
people?
Yes.
Well, during these war years, did you continue farming, on with your farming,
Yes.
and you raised things that were needed during the war?
Yes.
And all of this good stuff. Well, that is
The
just
tragedy of this growth to us older ones is the fact that we know nobody now.
well.
We are strangers in the land that we were born in and came up in. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it really is, and to see the farm make the change now.
Yes, that's a big change. Just to see it go from agriculture to homes and dwellings.
Dwellings and many, many people. Pearl, in riding the buggy all the way from Florence Hill into Grand Prairie, that impresses me. I would like to ride in the buggy. That sounds exciting. Tell me about the roads from Florence Hill into Grand Prairie,
Well, they were
Texas.
gravel roads. They were not too bad. They were, and I'd say they were fairly good roads for that day and time.
Well, I remember the old Beltline Road as it came into Grand Prairie. It wasn't a straight shot like you go down Carrier
We had
Parkway.
crooks and turns and ups and downs.
It followed each farm. It just followed the
The layout of the farm.
layout farms.
Uh-huh.
That was why it was crooked. It wasn't laid off a straight line.
No.
Well, in the Florence Hill area during your young days, who do you remember as some of the prominent families out there, so that we could name drop some of your neighbors that were nearby? Let's drop some names like that, would
All right,
you?
let's start with the C.B. Pools. They were south of
Yes,
us.
that was all south of me, too.
All right, Mr. and Mrs. C.B. Poole, can you give her name?
Ora
Ora.
C.B.
Wolf, wasn't
and
it?
Ora
Wolf.
Ora Wolf Poole, all right, and they live nearby, and
Well,
do they,
they
have
lived
any
on
children?
the hill that goes down to the, they're just on the edge of the lake
All
now.
right.
Well, Mr. Poole's land is in the lake.
Yeah.
Is now in the lake.
Uh-huh.
All right. And did they have children?
Yes, they had 3. But there's only one of them living now,
All
and that's
right.
Ruby.
Ruby Poole, and Ruby's going to be on our show very soon.
Sure is.
Yes, she's a very exciting person.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. All right, who else were the neighbors?
Well, Mausers,
The Mausers.
and I can't think of any more that's still alive.
Coming up that road, the Olsons, you could mention them.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
The Othans.
And
Now, there is a young lady that I've talked to on the phone out there quite extensively about the history of Grand Prairie, and that's Alice Allspaw.
Well,
now,
she's not living here now.
she is not living here
no,
now.
she lives at Mount Vernon, no, Mount
Yeah.
Pleasant,
Mount Pleasant.
near Mount, well, she lives in Mount Pleasant now.
All right.
They moved, Othan sold his farm south of Grand Prairie to the lake,
All right.
and they moved then, and she sold hers too.
And she sold hers too. Well, now, was she related in any way to
She was
you?
my sister-in-law. She
She
married
was-
my brother,
She married your brother.
Avery Allspaw.
Oh, great. Good.
And his son lived on that place, Othan Allspaw, and after they sold, well, then they located down there. He wanted to farm again. I mean, he wanted another farm, and he didn't want to buy it where he's going to have to move out in, a little while like this situation. So he moved off far enough to where I think he'll be able to not be pushed out again by something like that.
All right. Now, Pearl, I'd like for you to tell me this. If you had all of this to do over, would you still have pursued the career of teaching?
Oh, I loved it.
And tell us why. Tell us how it made you feel to be a teacher.
Well, I made a living by teaching, and
That's-
I also enjoyed children. And I taught in high school, and I enjoyed that teenage group.
Were you ever the sponsor of the class?
Oh,
or-
yes.
Now-
I put on banquets and plays and all the things that teachers have to do.
Could you evaluate now how different the boys and girls and their lifestyle is at this time than it was back in the times when you taught?
Well, I think they've got a lot more advantages than mine had in some respects, and then I don't think they have as much in some. I believe mine might have studied a little bit harder than some of them do today. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but you know, I don't think mine had as many distractions.
They have lots of temptations today, don't they?
I think so. I'm afraid that that's going to interfere a little bit with some of their studying.
All right, now, Marvin, would you tell us, when you were a young man, what you did for fun, what you did as a hobby, or to play? What did you do when you went out to play?
Well, we'd have parties in the community, and we'd all, as young folks, go, and our parents maybe chaperone us.
We all had ball games and a lot of other things too.
Yeah, we had ball games.
All right, now when you'd have your parties, were these sort of ice cream socials? Or?
Yes.
All right, and what kind of games did you all play back 40 or 50 years ago?
Well, it's been longer than that.
Yes.
Well, I can't think of anything really.
You just had a good time,
Yeah,
didn't
just a
you?
good time.
And what all did y'all have for refreshments? You didn't have Cokes, apparently,
No.
and chocolate chip cookies. What all did
Well,
y'all
it'd be
do?
ice cream or something that the parents would make for us.
Well, do you all go back to the reunion that they have annually at Florence Hill? And you're members of the group there?
Yes.
When do you plan on having your very next reunion at Florence Hill? Do you have any
It'll
idea?
be in May.
It'll be in May of this year.
I believe it's first Sunday in May.
Yeah, I think so.
The first Sunday in May. And who all do you think will be coming to this reunion? All of the old timers?
Yes, they're scattered over the state and maybe out of the state, but there'll be quite a few there.
All right, do you know the president of the Florence Hill Reunion Group? I know that
I
Mr.
believe
Brackenridge was, and then when
Yeah.
he passed away,
I believe it's Maple.
Mr. Mauser was for a while,
Yeah.
I believe, and then who was
I think
next?
I've been 1 or 2 years. But I think Mabel Allen, what's her name?
I don't know what Mabel Allen's name is, and I really don't know whether she's the president either.
Well, we're just going to have to...
I missed that last year.
You're going to
because-
have to see that we get an invitation to come to Florence
Oh,
Hill
yes,
to the reunion so that we can possibly do a tape for you.
I believe she's president this year. But and I'm not for sure on that, but I think she is.
Well, y'all aren't going to believe this, but our 30 minutes have already passed. And we want to thank you all so very much for being with us to help us bring back the memories. And we want to say thanks for the memories and all of the good things that you've brought to us. You all have just been wonderful. And we want to have you all back when you can think of some of the other good things to tell us about the past of Grand Prairie, Texas. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.